Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Today, we've got Mr. Nick Thomas with us today. Nick, how are you?
Good to see you, Mark.
Nick, you spent 35 years at NASA's Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex,
Yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
And you ever had any boring days?
Not a one. And there was never a day that I was ever sad to go into work. So that's 35 years of being paid for my hobby.
Well, that's a loaded question because I've gotten to know you, and I knew you, and you wouldn't have had a difficult day out there. A couple of difficult days, of course, but
Some are a little more action-packed than
yeah.
others.
Well, you're part of that NASA family out there, and you can go out there and see Nick. I teasingly call him the astronaut wrangler. Every day of the week, with your admission at Kennedy Visitors Complex, you can see a real live astronaut and talk to them and get their autograph.
Mhm.
And some of you have Nick's DNA on your cameras and phones out there, okay? Because, man, how many pictures you think you've taken over your career? You ever just counting sheep at night and that comes up
Counting
to go to bed?
pictures, yeah.
You ever thought about it? You think about that, buddy, one time.
I'm too busy taking pictures to think about it.
Yes, yes. Well, it's a lot of fun out there. We're supporting them out there. I enjoy going out there and seeing the astronaut of the day because we celebrate their birthdays on Stay Curious, and I get a little more personal, introspective with them, like we did with Mr. Mark Brown over the weekend. And if you're on he's gone, but I hope he'll
Today's
hopefully
his
he'll come
last
back
day,
again.
and yeah, I'm sure he'll be back. He had a really good
He
time.
really talked about his family, his wife
Yeah.
and two girls, and they were the whole process of his being an astronaut. In fact, being the process of him turning down a third mission, he said.
He's got a wonderful home movie in his presentation that shows his little daughter out at Edwards Air Force Base. The mom says, "What are we doing, honey?" So we're waiting. So what are we waiting for? She said, "Space shuttle."
Yeah.
So, just another day in the life of the family.
Just another day in the life of the family.
Yeah.
Well, let's throw some images up there. Well, before I do that, of course, we've got the famous rendezvous of Gemini 6 and 7 took place this week in space history 56 years ago. You and I were
Fantastic.
teenagers. When we saw these pictures coming back, what did that make you feel like, Nick?
Well, to me, I remember it was just, only months after those beautiful pictures of Ed White doing this first spacewalk on Gemini 4. And now we've got pictures of the spacecraft in orbit with the Earth in the background. And as a kid, I'm looking at these pictures in Life magazine and in National Geographic, and I'm saying, can it get any cooler? It just keeps getting more and more amazing. So these pictures for us as kids, watching them in here in Florida, these were just remarkable reminders that we were progressing step by step toward that landing on the moon. And the Russians may have had a number of firsts on us, but we had that solid engineering, developmental flight test engineering program going on that was going to get us to the moon. I think we all felt that, and we all felt the excitement of it.
And Nick's going to help tell the story. Why did we have two Gemini spacecraft orbiting the Earth at the same time? But what is lost that baby boomers like Nick and I understand is we never saw a spaceship in orbit before.
Yeah.
These pictures came back, and then they landed, and you didn't even see them for about a week, until they come out in Life magazine or whatever. And for me, I was in Northwest Ohio, near where Neil Armstrong grew up. Where were you turned on to this?
At my hometown, Daytona Beach, Florida, and while we were all excited by Project Mercury, Gemini was a time of I can't explain it, but a different kind of excitement. Mercury was sort of like the first time for all of us, but now Gemini, we were firmly in the saddle, headed down this road of going to the moon, and each Gemini mission brought with it a new first, new technology, new techniques, and it was just an exciting time to be watching the space program. And in a way, I will compare that to the excitement that we have with the Commercial Crew Program, where we're seeing the growth and the maturity of the technology now as we go through with the Commercial Crew flights up to the International Space Station, and later on their upcoming involvement with the Artemis program. So it's, history simply keeps repeating itself in a way.
Yes, because there is a new way of going to space now, just like this was a new way. And in 2 years, 10 Gemini missions 2 men each. 22 men went to space. Of course, there was multiple flights of a couple of them. And like I said, we never saw pictures of spacecraft in space before, so the wires dangling off the back, that was kind of interesting to see, because you thought things were so clean and everything, and impression and that.
But then at the same time, we were amazed by that beautiful mylar backing of the adapter module.
Right.
We're, the straps hanging off was, well, that's probably supposed to happen, but look at that beautiful gold backing on the back of the spacecraft. None of us had any idea that was what was back there.
And then to think of Gemini 9, that Gene Cernan was supposed to go back there and put something on. We could relate to that in our minds finally in there. Yeah, in 2 years, every 6 weeks, that's the excitement came in. And I tell people that come to our museum, what was the Twitter of the 1960s? How could you find out the most accurate information, what was going on? And that would have been AM radio.
There's AM radio at the top and the bottom of each hour, and they'd have a little brief blurb from Mission Control. And of course, on television for the major mission events, you had Walter Cronkite and Frank Reynolds and some other remarkable space journalists on television who, as I say, particularly Cronkite, really made an effort to bring the public along on all this, to talk up to them, to explain the technology and the techniques and so forth. I was talking to Mark Brown, I think it was, recently, and we kind of compared some of the broadcast journalism of back then to some of the broadcast journalism today, and there's a very, very marked difference between the two. If you go to YouTube and pull up Gemini 6, Gemini 7 launch, or any of the Gemini or Apollo missions, and just listen to these commentators, particularly Cronkite, in how they elevate the discussion, if you will.
Jules Bergman, and the other guy I never can think of, Mark Usiak knows who he is. They were kind of the top three there. We're going to work up a little show with Mr. Hugh Harris. About
Hugh will have those stories.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get when Hugh turned 90 the other day.
Bless his heart, outstanding! Happy
turned
birthday,
90 years
Hugh!
Old, and he's going to be in here Wednesday.
Good.
On Stay Curious, we're going to talk about Christmases in space with the former voice of NASA, Mr. Hugh Harris. Well, we're here with Nick Thomas. We're so pleased that he has embraced our nonprofit. As you know, for over 20 years, we've been preserving the birth of America's space age in what is delivery room, Brevard County. The 5 years I lived in the county and been down here, it's changed my life. I can't it's just a wonderful place to be involved with quality people like Nick and Hugh Harris and so forth, wanting to support our museum. And part of that support of the museum comes with support from people who financially give us money, and we are grateful to Delaware North for financially supporting our memorabilia show, and therefore you on Stay Curious here, Nick. So let your bosses know that we're promoting them on here. The beautiful look of their I love that's one of my favorite things out there, when they replace the logo with the ornament there, and of course President Kennedy, the eternal water fountain you got going back there. This is as you walk in the place.
Yeah, it's a marvelous first impression, and you're really bathed in the history of the program from the minute you enter the complex. And from here, you walk through the rocket garden and see the generations of launch vehicles that have carried us into space and brought us back home safely. So it really is, it's an immersive experience before you even get through the gate.
Right there's the first thing you see, and we do thank Delaware North for supporting our nonprofit. And things are jazzed up around there a little bit.
Yes, we have a multitude of Christmas trees and some great decorations out there. We've got the Christmas music playing over the sound system, so it's definitely...
They're staying open late 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Till 6 on next week, and Christmas week till 7.
Right, and so we're...
This week till 6, I guess.
Firmly in the holiday spirit, firmly in the Christmas spirit out there at KSCVC.
And it gets dark at 5:36, so I'm going to go out there and see some...
Got to see the rocket garden.
I got a picture of a rocket inside the rocket garden there, and then somebody
there he is.
Photobombed me there.
Yes,
all right.
Sinister-looking gentleman behind the console.
Photobombing me there the other day. But it's going to look pretty at night. That was the other day when I was out during an event. The gateway, the new facility, the new gateway exhibit is really a hit, isn't it?
It really is. And I was mentioning to Mark Brown, we were talking about some of the experiences in there. And there's one experience where you do a fly over the Martian surface. And I told him that experience is so immersive that when we came up on a Martian mountain range, I literally picked my feet up
Really?
so I wouldn't
Okay, I
bump
can't wait
into
to
the
do
mountains.
that.
That's how totally immersive that exhibit is.
That's on my bucket list for enjoying the holidays. Is do they have 4 different little programs,
Uh-huh.
don't they,
Yeah,
up there?
yeah.
So,
Experiences as they call them now.
well, we hadn't said formally hi to Marty Winkle, my co-producer, who 50 years ago was cheering the landing of
Wow.
the Grumman-built lunar module number 12 Challenger. Touched down the lunar surface at 2:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday, December 11th. That would have been yesterday. And Gene Cernan and Jack Schmidt began a 3-day campout in a place called Taurus Littrow. Marty, how are you? Good to see you. How about 50 years ago, your last lunar module on the surface of the moon? How much pride did you Grummies have in that?
A lot of pride. I mean, it's hard to describe how much pride somebody has, but it was just a great feeling of seeing that return. And while I'm on the mic, Tom Usiak says Frank McGee.
Oh,
Is it
Frank McGee, wasn't he
Frank,
something?
Yeah, Frank McGee. I always remember Frank
yes,
McGee on
absolutely.
ABC. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, the whole you just think about 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and as Marty says, this is the only vehicle built to be flown in the environment of space, only space,
Right.
lift off of another alien world. The pilots are standing up, not sitting down. No one's ever done that yet.
Yeah.
But there's a billionaire that says, I'm going to pick 12 people and we're going to circle the moon in a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? In
I,
context of 50 years ago, no one's even built a vehicle that's orbited the Earth like that.
I have learned never to put anything past Elon Musk.
Okay.
You know, I'm seeing these rockets land out at Pad 13 or on the drone ship out there in the ocean, and if he's got it down there, I think there's a very good chance that he's going to follow through with it. It won't be for lack of trying.
No, it
And
won't.
he has got. I got to say this: Elon gets all the plaudits, and that's as it should be. But at the same time, he has got some incredible people working for him. He really, really does.
Mhm.
They've got some people who've been out there solving some problems that not only solving the problems, but making those solutions much more economical than the way we used to do business in manned spaceflight. So the amount of progress that's been made in the technology of the manned spaceflight program, a lot of that goes to Elon and his team, and I will say that his team because they've got some great folks working over there at SpaceX.
Well, I love talking about current events with Nick Thomas. We can make a whole show about it because we all value your opinion. You've been involved in this so much and talked to so many people. So that's a good introspective there. We had another experience yesterday that I had never experienced before. Here's the picture of Artemis rounding the moon with the crescent Earth behind me there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was kind of a cool picture, real live picture there. And then after we chatted with Mr. Mark Brown, and a very, very delightful public speaker for sure, we went out on the lawn behind Atlantis and watched the splashdown party out there. And that was quite fun to do. I applaud the Space Center for doing this. They don't have to.
Yeah, and the splashdown of the Orion spacecraft, we really have to mention some incredible milestones on that. In that, during the Apollo program, they always had the idea of doing what was called a skip reentry to decelerate and then make your final entry. But they never really had the engineering or the hardware or the ability to breadboard that to have enough confidence to do it. So it was always something that was on the side. But now, over the past decade, we've had enough time and enough advancement in technology that we could refine those numbers, that we could breadboard it and make sure that it would work. So we did a skip reentry of this vehicle yesterday, and basically she came in, grazed into the atmosphere, and then came up and out of it, and then came down in a steeper trajectory for the final reentry. And the main thing that technique accomplished was to lighten the G load. Now, back in the Apollo days, coming through the atmosphere, you would be looking at anywhere from 10 to 11 Gs. And a pretty punishing regimen. This re-entry yesterday, 4Gs.
Was it?
That's a
Okay.
very
10 to
civilized.
11 Gs. That's a ballistic
That's
reentry almost.
that's a
on
very civilized
Soyuz.
ride in 4Gs
Yeah.
now. So again, the crews are really going to benefit by that history that we made yesterday. And another one of the NASA managers really put into context as to how bold this Artemis program is. After this flight, Artemis 1, our next flight, Artemis 2, will carry astronauts to orbit the moon. And Artemis 2 is basically going to be a combination of Apollo 7 and Apollo 8. Then on Artemis 3, when we land, that's going to be a combination of Apollos 9, 10, and 11.
Okay.
So it's a very bold, a very forward-looking program that we've got here, and it's very exciting.
It is. And
Yeah.
when do you think they're going to announce the astronauts for Artemis
I've heard a
2?
couple of things. I've heard maybe at the end of this year. I've heard perhaps in the first quarter of next year. I don't know, but
Do you know how many they want to take to orbit the moon?
there's going to be
4 or
four.
6?
All I know is that there's going to be a 4-member crew, and one will be a Canadian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard the one Canadian,
Right.
Canada, and Japan are involved in the ESA. It's involved in the service module.
Right. Yeah, ESA is
and-
involved in the service module, but
and,
right now, crew-wise, the only person that we've got outlined is the one Canadian seat, if you will.
Gee, well, how many Canadian astronauts are floating out there?
I'll tell you, it's
Just probably 3 or 4. when you-
exciting times
Yeah,
now,
it
both in
is.
Canada and the United States.
It is. Marty, you got a question or comment from one of our Stay Curious fans out there?
Yeah, we have a question from Larry Puskar. He's asking, would Marty have wanted to go to the moon and see his work in action?
Well, Larry, what do you say, Marty?
As long as he has it as past tense, wanted to go, versus want to go now. Back then, I was kind of young and probably naive and infallible. so
You
I
were
probably
physically
would've said
fit too,
yes.
no doubt about that. But yes, I I know what you're saying. If I was, the people that were picked by this billionaire to orbit the moon here, one of them is one of the big influencers, the everyday astronaut, Todd. And if they picked me, I couldn't go. You want to torture me? Put me on one ride at Disney, and I have such an ear imbalance, it'd be horrible. But well, we're going to get into our stuff here. We wanted to tease you a little bit. Where's Marty in this picture here when we go out to Kennedy Space Center? We haven't been doing that. Where's Marty, you think, in there? Well, I'm just going to save it. He's in the upper right-hand corner. Where are we there? We're over here. In the upper right in the middle there. There you are, Marty, in your white shirt there. Connie's beside you there. That was a fun, casual event. Everybody applauded when it landed. But it was a good way to see it, wasn't it? A big screen TV, like at a drive-in theater, without the popcorn. Well, we're going to talk with Nick here. We love establishing that Nick's been around. When you say 35 years, well, that encompasses a lot of astronauts. And who are these wonderful?
This was a reunion we had for Gemini 12 some years ago, and in the right side of the picture is Jim Lovell, and to the left, Buzz Aldrin. And this was just before a public presentation they were about to do, and this was all sponsored by the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. So while they're not talking, they're in the green room signing pictures, autographing pictures, passing them one to the next. So
Yep.
it definitely kept the guys busy. Just a couple of remarkable folks.
Crewmates
Yeah,
on
crewmates.
GT-12.
Right. A remarkable, we'll get on this on Gemini 7, particularly about Jim Lovell and Frank Borman, but you've got a wide range of personalities in that office, and you've got guys who are, intense pilots, if you will, and you've got other guys who are perhaps a little more easygoing in the mode of Jim Lovell there. And you look back at the time, these astronauts were selected for crews. And by golly, Deke Slayton never missed a step when it came to astronaut selection. He always was able to balance up the personalities of these crews in such a way that they complemented one another. And I will tell you, he did that without an extensive psychological interview or test or anything. He just knew people, and he knew who would fit with who, and there you had it. Remarkable.
That'd be an interesting book in itself. The
Well,
Mind
yeah,
of Deke Slayton.
if you
and
read Deke
Turner.
Slayton's autobiography, it's entitled Deke, and he talks a lot about the crew selections for Gemini and Apollo.
Here's what you're doing today.
Mhm.
This is Kathy Thornton up
Yep.
there autographing some stuff. We just love seeing the families
Yeah.
up there, and this is at the this is during the morning or noon.
Yeah, the
when
morning,
you
this is
order.
the noon autograph opportunity.
Yeah.
We have two autograph ops, one at noon at the second floor of the primary gift shop, and then the second one at 4:15 over at the Atlantis gift shop.
And we're doing Stay Curious, and they're autographing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your buddy Mark Brown's
Brown,
over there handling
right.
everything. Not my Mark Smith. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a communicator, and the astronaut is Mark Brown, and tomorrow we'll bring Bill MacArthur on board.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And Bill's out there about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He's a very interesting
Oh, yeah,
guy. You don't want to
absolutely.
meet Bill. He's done a lot of different
One of our Army
crew-
astronauts.
Yeah, he's done a lot of different crew selections in there. We got a couple birthdays here today, Nick. First, we will quickly want to say happy birthday to this Jayhawk. Stephen Hawley was born on this day, December 12th, 1951, in Ottawa, Kansas. He regards Salina, Kansas, as his hometown. He was married and divorced from the late astronaut Sally Ride, veteran of 5 space shuttle missions. He deployed the space shuttle, the Hubble Space Telescope on STS-31, and then he went up and did a service mission on it on 82. An early astronaut, he was up in 84 and 86. Very experienced guy. So happy 71st birthday to Stephen Hawley.
Interesting story about Dr. Stevie, as they called him. They were doing a panel one time, and each of the astronauts introduced themselves and talked about the service that they were from and what they flew. So you'd have one guy saying, so-and-so, I'm an attack pilot. No, so-and-so, I'm a aircraft carrier pilot. And they got to Dr. Stevie, and he said, Steve Hawley, attack astronomer.
Attack astronomer, that's cute. And I love him because he is an astronomer, and that's what he did at Kansas, University of Kansas, as a physics professor, age 71. He's enjoying a good life, still living in Kansas there. So, and he looks, he hasn't aged he's aged very well when you see him in pictures. And then also Ken Ham, his, well, you know what his nickname is?
No, what's that?
Hawk.
Hawk, okay, right.
Ham Hawk. All right. He was a one-time pilot, one-time commander, STS-124 and 132. We are wishing him a happy 58th birthday today. Born in 1964 on December 12th in Plainfield, New Jersey. And he is a graduate of Arthur Johnson High School in Clark, New Jersey. And one of the guys late in the mission there, and he's still young. I always wonder what these guys are doing now.
It's always a bit of a shake-up for me to come across an astronaut who's younger than I am. I'm still having trouble accepting that.
One-time pilot, one-time commander. So he learned real quick, and like I said, did not segue into any of the private companies. He served as a crew member on the Vomit Comet, giving people tours on that too. So happy birthday to Ken Ham and Steve Hawley on this December 12th. We love acknowledging them, Nick, because all these astronauts are in their communities doing wonderful things to promote space and inspire the next generation.
Yeah, there's a responsibility many of them feel to be able to come back and talk to the public one-on-one as they do over at the KSC Visitors Complex. They take that very seriously. They're very glad to do it. They really enjoy it, and they especially enjoy inspiring the young people, that next STEM generation, that next Artemis generation that's going to carry us back to the moon and on to Mars.
That's right. Over 300 American astronauts in our country. So come see one at a space museum near you someday in there. And, that's kind of interesting I think about that. We're like, we're spoiled. There's astronauts always in our county. But you know what? There could be a time when in the whole state of Tennessee, where I live, for example, there's not one astronaut in that state on that given day.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you know what I mean? Or
We can largely count on one being in Florida at any
there's
given time.
592 humans have gone to space in 61 years, and so it's not unusual that you could be in a huge venue or a whole state, like Kansas or somebody, unless they live there. Just a weird thing I think about sometimes there. So. Gemini 7.
Right.
We're gonna find out why was Gemini 7, and the Roman numerals is what NASA used, and they called it Gemini, like Jiminy Cricket. It's Gemini, the constellation, but either way you pronounce it, we understand it. Nick, tell us why the GT7 was launched ahead of GT6, and we'll.
GT6 had a series of problems. GT6's original mission was to perform the first rendezvous and docking with an Agena docking target. In fact, her original name was GTA6, and her original patch of Gemini 6 showed the Gemini chasing down an Agena rocket. Well, on the day they were supposed to launch, the first launch would be the Atlas Agena, and the Atlas performed well, but at the time of separation, they lost all telemetry, and then they saw multiple targets descending through the atmosphere, and so sure the Agena had blown up. So Wally and Tom Stafford had left the pad that day, and then they started to think about the idea, well, why don't we combine the ideas of rendezvous with two vehicles? And so they came up with the idea of launching Gemini 6 and then launching Gemini 7 and have them rendezvous in orbit. Well, the next attempt on Gemini 6, as I recall, was the one where they had the abort on the pad where the engine shut down. And let me see, I'm trying to remember how the whole geography worked out here. In the short rows here, 7 got launched before 6. So chronologically, 7 was up first, and so 6 had a lot of time to get up there and perform the rendezvous. One of their launch attempts on Gemini 6 was aborted because the engine shut down on the pad, but they finally did get the vehicle off the pad with enough time to spare to get up there and make the rendezvous with Gemini 7. And of course, 7's mission was long-duration spaceflight, 14 days up in orbit.
Thus, the flame,
like an
right?
The
duration,
right? The runner's torch. And here you have our crew for Gemini 7. On the left is Jim Lovell, and on the right is Mission Commander Frank Borman, very appropriately choosing the attire of the classic test pilot with the helmets, the oxygen masks, and the flight scarves. So they definitely had the right idea as far as their role as test pilots on this pioneering long-duration flight.
And if you wondered about them, they are both 94 years old. They are the longest living space travelers on Earth right now. Borman's a little older than Lovell, and they are best of friends at age 94. I think that's so cool.
Well, it's remarkable. You had two fellows there who were so well balanced in their temperament. You had Frank Borman, who was a hard-charging, mission-focused commander, and you had Jim Lovell, who was the easygoing pilot. And you had these, as I said earlier, these two guys who really balanced each other out perfectly. And you couldn't have chosen a better crew for a 14-day-long mission in that Gemini spacecraft.
And we're going to talk about these two astronauts again when they paired. They joined. Were joined by Bill Anders, to orbit the moon. And Nick's going to come back and talk about Apollo 8, which I'm excited about because it really means more to me than Apollo 11 in many ways. But
remarkable pioneering mission.
Yeah, but these two guys just is so cool what they've done for America's space program of pioneering the unknowns of can we live in space for 2 weeks? And you just can't believe the small vehicle that they stayed 2 weeks in and didn't even open the door. But who we got there in those wonderful looking ascot flight scarves there.
On the right side, we have the prime crew of Frank Borman and Jim Lovell. And on the left side of the model, we have our backup crew, commanded by Ed White and his pilot, Mike Collins. Mike Collins, in his book, Carrying the Fire, talked about what a joy it was to work with Ed White and what a fine Gemini commander or even an Apollo commander Ed would have made. So you got a wonderfully balanced crew here. Some people who are going to go on to make some great history, and just remarkable members of the astronaut office.
Certainly are. Of course, Collins was Gemini 10, did a spacewalk. Ed White segued right into the Apollo command
right
module,
to
so
Apollo 1.
He did not
So
do a second flight.
no, he was cycled out of the backup crew for 7 straight into the Apollo program and was going to be the senior pilot for Apollo 1.
Yeah, and then of course Lovell. Borman retired after Gemini Apollo 8, could have walked on the moon as a commander. Lovell was going to walk on the moon in Apollo 13, and you all know how that worked out.
And it was interesting on Frank Borman. There were some people within NASA who said that Frank had done such a great job on Apollo 8 that they felt that Frank should command the first lunar landing mission whenever it happened.
Yeah.
And Deke Slayton said, no, we're not going to do that. You know, we've got a rotation here that works and that's fair and that's honest, and no, we're really not going to go that route. So Frank, after Apollo 8, became very closely associated with the Nixon administration.
Yeah.
He did a lot of outreach to the Soviet Union at that time. So Frank found a good path for himself. Of course, went on to become the president of Eastern Airlines, and until not too long ago, was still flying his own P-51 Mustang.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was beside Richard Nixon, the president, when they landed on the moon. Was in the Oval Office and all that as a liaison for that.
And Frank was the astronaut liaison to the Apollo 1 investigation and did so much on the ground to keep that investigation moving and finding the problem and getting it solved. So Frank Borman, as you look over the history of his time at NASA, was really one of the Mount Rushmore guys of the program.
Yes, great guy. There's how cramped it is, folks.
Yeah.
When you shut those gull wings,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, you got an inch, maybe a couple inches above your head, and then you're looking out those windows.
Slightly closer than you and I are right
Oh
now.
man,
It
would be.
This is
something else.
one of the mission simulators that we had. We had one at Johnson at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas, and then another one in the Mission Control Center over on Cape Canaveral. Now, it was interesting, since you had 2 spacecraft up, they had to decide how they were going to apportion mission control between these 2 flights. And so what they did was Mission Control in Houston, which came online for Gemini 4, they were in overall command until the actual rendezvous. At that time, mission control for Gemini 6 was handed over to the old flight control room here at Cape Canaveral, while the mission control room at the Manned Spacecraft Center was maintained watch over Gemini 7. Yeah.
That's it's provided some challenges there. They had special space suits, Nick, for this mission. They call it the soft suit.
Yep.
Because they weren't going to be exposed to the elements of space. They wanted them to be reasonably comfortable, yet have protection and reentry in case they lost cabin pressure.
Yeah, well, the idea was originally going into it that for 24 hours, one crewman would be in the suit while the other one would doff it and just be in his long underwear, and then they would switch back and forth every 24 hours. However, something came up, and I can't recall what it was, that kept Borman in his suit for the better part of 3 days straight, and that was very, very uncomfortable. And so they were finally able to get Borman out of his suit and Jim back into his. But those lightweight spacesuits, if you look at them closely, they bear a heck of a resemblance to the pressure suits that SpaceX uses now. Almost the same principle. Lightweight. You unzip the helmet. You can see the zipper around the helmet there.
I just wanted to point out who's, so people that don't know, who's in Borman's ear there.
Oh, yeah, that's our chief astronaut. That's Alan Shepard. And the boss was always close at hand for every one of these missions. And his guiding hand was what steered those crews in the right direction, getting ready for a mission. It was his job to make sure these guys were ready to perform the mission. And with Shepard overseeing the process, there was just no question that these guys were going to be as ready as humanly possible.
Very interesting spacesuit there.
Jim Lovell there.
The right glove rings are red. The left ones are silver. They continued that through the Apollo program.
And here the guys are coming out of the suit-up trailer
What
over
a
at
fancy trailer there.
Pad 16, and that was just a
Don't
short
slip.
drive.
Coming
That was
out,
just a
guys.
short drive away from Pad 19. And that was before we started doing the suit-up process for Apollo over at the operations and checkout building. But for Gemini, they suited up in that trailer over at Pad 16.
We like showing some of our museum memorabilia. There's a Paul Calley sketch that we have on the wall of the astronauts as Mr. Callie saw them coming out, like right there. He was among the press corps there. He's passed away, but his son Chris Callie is a good friend of ours and an artist in his own right. Hello, Chris. Thank you for staying curious today. And that blue flight suit's what Gus Grissom wore after GT3.
Yeah.
We've got it on a 5'6" mannequin there to match
There you go.
the great Gus, and there's the GT7 on the wall there where they came back. They joked that they were together for 14 days. What was the joke about that?
Well, years later, after the event, Jim Lovell was talking about it, and of course they're in the helicopter coming back to the aircraft carrier, and Jim said what they were going to do when they stepped off the helicopter onto the carrier. They were going to hold hands and tell everyone they were engaged.
Well, there's our Spaceview Park with the paver acknowledging them, and those pylons have the only place in the world you can put your hands on Jim Lovell's hands in bronze there. And we love that. And this is part of our heritage here, a beautiful Spaceview Park. It's to us, it's like a Taj Mahal. Again, there's over 30 astronauts that you can put their handprints in. And yes, some of the Gemini, Mercury, and Apollo are in all three areas. Marty's got his name in the shuttle in the Atlantis area up there. And we've got a question.
Yeah, Mark Uziak is asking, why didn't they stay with the soft suits?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, the following missions, Gemini's 8, 9, 10, and 11, had to support EVAs. So we had to open up those hatches, and one of the guys had to go outside. My guess is that soft suit was not going to be able to withstand a cabin depressurization or a spacewalk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question, Mark. Maybe Apollo 8 could have used the same ones, but again, they're exposed to more radiation.
But by the time we got to Apollo 8, we were doffing suits as soon as we got up into Earth orbit. Put them back on for the S4B, the TLI burn. But for a large part, the crews were out of their suits for the majority of the flight for Apollo.
Well, then we get the Gemini 6 launched after Gemini 7. And if you want to hear a great program, Nick did a wonderful program on Wally Schirra first week in October. You spent a lot of time with Wally, and then he's passed away. But the General Tom Stafford is 92 years old, lives over here on the coast. He pops up once in a while, even in the museum, but haven't seen him since COVID.
And I will tell you that Tom Stafford has had more to do with the advance of aviation technology than I think almost anyone on the planet. It was Tom who sketched out the idea of stealth technology, I'm told, on the back of a cocktail napkin.
Really?
He's been highly influential in Air Force and aerospace and now Space Force circles. So Stafford, again, stands as one of the giants of this program. And I may have told the story earlier, and we'll see this on one of our later slides. General Stafford was at the Visitors Complex, and we were talking about his Gemini 9 capsule, which we have on display there. And I said, yeah, I tell people that Gemini 9 made the closest splashdown to the carrier in the Gemini program. And he looked at me, he said, the closest in the Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo program. And from there, he went on to, quote, bank angles, reverse bank angles, lift vectors. He sat there and literally reflew that reentry for me. He is Gene Cernan used to call him the human computer. And I found out why that day. The man has got a mind that is absolutely beyond comprehension.
It is. I've been around him a couple of times. He's got a wonderful museum in Stafford, Oklahoma, his hometown. You been there?
Over in Weatherford?
Yeah, in Weatherford.
No, I haven't.
We need a road trip. Marty, we're going to kidnap him and take him on a road trip when we go one day. We're going to go down Interstate 40, hit Oklahoma City, hit Weatherford, go up to the Cosmosphere. You ready?
Give me a box of cigars and you can take me anywhere.
And leave your credit card with your wife, and everything will be good. Box of cigars. All right, that'd be good. But Tom Stafford, every one of his 4 missions was a very important mission in the space program. He could have easily been one of the moonwalkers.
Mike Collins.
You know what he became after his retirement as an astronaut? He became a general at Edwards Air Force Base and got that place into shape.
I remember that Mike Collins in his book In Carrying the Fire said Tom Stafford was a man who should have gone to the moon several times over because of everything he contributed to the program.
Wow.
Again, one of the Mount Rushmore guys of
Yeah,
this program.
we're going to end our program with a couple cool pictures
Yeah.
of him. But I'm very pleased to have met him.
Yeah.
And when I talked to him and said I've been at your museum 4 times, he goes, "I got more mannequins than anybody." He said, "Had they moved the T-38 when you were there?" And I go, "No, sir." And he grabbed a napkin in front of me, and he starts sketching.
Yep.
He says, "Well, they put that T-38 over here, and they moved those light poles over here out there, and they're going to put this and that." And I'm, this guy doesn't know me from that doorknob over there, and he's like sketching out, so proud of that he is. And him and Gene Cernan were best friends till the day Gene Cernan left this earth. And Max Airy, who's over that museum, was over the Cosmosphere, told me several times what just blood brothers they were, Cernan and Stafford. So, well, let's get on with that mission there. We get gushy here about our astronauts, talking to the astronaut wrangler here. We've got, who we got there?
We got Alan Shepard with Wally Schirra.
Yeah.
Commander of Gemini 6, again going over some last-minute details in that suit-up trailer over at Pad 16.
Oh, that's inside that trailer.
Yeah, right. And
Okay.
it might have been Mike Collins again who said that Gemini 6 was a perfect mission for Wally. All he had to do was get up there, do the rendezvous, play his harmonica, and then come back home.
Yeah, right.
And they were up there for just over a day, a very short mission, but it was jam-packed with a lot of activity, highlighted by that rendezvous with Gemini 6. Again, Al Shepard with Tom Stafford in the suit-up trailer over at Pad 16.
All the astronauts love riding that Titan II rocket.
Titan II was exciting, especially at staging, because you had what was called fire in the hole staging, which is to say that the engines of the second stage ignited before you dropped off the first stage. And what that would result in would be a fireball surrounding the spacecraft. So you literally flew through your own fireball on that Gemini Titan launch.
That.
Yeah, very exciting.
There's the 2 of them.
Again, this is in the trailer, and here's Wally seated and Tom standing, and on the right, to Wally's to the right in the picture is Joe Schmidt, and
that's Joe
and
Schmidt.
Joe was doing these suit ups for the astronauts, starting with Al Shepard on Freedom 7. So Joe was a longtime member of the team for
SCHMIDT.
I would have to go back and
Schmidt,
check it. Yeah,
Joe Schmidt. Yeah, we've seen some memorabilia of his there.
Here are the guys coming off of Pad 19. This was after the Aegina had blown up after separating from the Atlas launch vehicle, and the guys are coming out. No launch that day, and you can see walking down that pad. They're heading back to the van, and they'll go back to Pad 16 and get those suits off. Now, the next picture I think you have there is the shutdown, the on-pad shutdown. And we were talking about this earlier. We all talk about the idea of Schirra being so calm and cool and not ejecting from that spacecraft when that engine shut down. And for a number of reasons. Even though Wally saw that the clock had started inside the spacecraft, he did not feel the liftoff in the seat of his pants. And so he decided the vehicle had not left the pad and they were in no danger. They could go ahead and stay with it. But then recently I read an interesting take on the possibility of an on-pad ejection that came from Tom Stafford. And Stafford said that that spacecraft, that capsule, had been soaked with pure oxygen at about 14 to 16 psi for 2 hours. So if you ignited those rocket seats inside that spacecraft, Tom said you would have had 2 Roman candles come flying out of that capsule. And that would have been true all through the ascent, because we use pure oxygen all throughout the Gemini and the Mercury program. So if during ascent you had attempted to pull those D-rings and eject out of there, you would have ignited that high-pressure pure O2 environment. Now, up in ascent, your cabin pressure was bled down, so that might have mitigated it somewhat. But as I was saying to Marty earlier, there was probably some slide rule jockey who said, well, if that environment blows up because of the rocket seats, they'll probably only be in that flaming environment for about a fraction of a second. Well, you want to go in there and test that out in those suits and see if you could survive it?
Yeah. Indeed, harrowing situation there. And in our museum, we have the respiratory and heart rate EKGs that Mr. Bob Seek who launched a record 57 shuttles. He was involved with this as a medical part of the Gemini program. He was also a weatherman. How Bob Seek came into NASA. Tom Stafford autographed for us, and when you roll it out, the EKG and respiratory rate shows that they weren't a bit scared. It was like, damn it, we were ready to go. What's going on here?
You know, and you'll see that from all of the shuttle astronauts as well, because people ask them, were you scared on the launch pad? Were you scared waiting for the liftoff? And without exception, they'll say, no, we were looking forward to it. We were anxious to go because we had trained for the mission for the better part of a year, and we were primed and spring-loaded to go and perform that mission.
Well, we're proud that everybody's watching us today. We're going to get the boys up in orbit here. Melissa Pope, thank you for watching. I heard about your new job, young lady. Dave Stange, Steve Hammer, Doug Forrest is watching in Los Angeles. There's Mark Usiak. Why don't you say hi to...
We got hello to Michael Boyd, to our old friend Carlton Bailey.
And we mean old.
Yeah, now, you
Cynthia
heard that.
Rossi.
You heard who said that, Carlton. We've got William Whiting, Kerry Kotzak, Larry Puskar, Gary Gerrids.
Gary Gerald. He's our peanut farmer. You like peanut butter, don't you?
That's it.
Yeah, he's our farmer out there in Georgia.
Farewell Hartley and Daniel DeJong.
Daniel DeJong was in the studio this week. He's an airline pilot for Spirit Airlines.
Okay.
He goes between Detroit and Orlando and Boston and.
Celentino.
Pardon me?
Tom Celentino.
Tom
Celentino. All right, in there. And we know that John Darlington's been watching. Tony Achilles. Hi, Tony. Tony Bridges. Yvette Weingold also have chimed in on some of our posts up there. So we do appreciate you. I hope you're enjoying these wonderful stories from Mr. Nick Thomas.
And just as a heads up for you and for Marty, I send these YouTube links to several of the astronauts who are post-experience viewers, if you will. So folks like Terry Wilcott and Guy Gardner who are very interested in our program. So while they may not be watching live, they certainly watch the playback because I send them the link after we do the show.
Thank you. Guy Gardner's what a great talk he is, getting people inspired. It's just wonderful how these guys give their time. And thank you, Nick, because this is how the American Space Museum, how we roll, is we build these bridges to people and hope that they get who we are. We don't want to be the biggest or the best. You know, we know what our lane is, and it's celebrating space workers that support these wonderful space programs. So thank you, Nick. Well, let's get the guys up in space. Nick, you pulled some pictures up there to talk about.
These pictures were really remarkable. As I said, we had just come off of only a few months ago seeing those remarkable pictures of Ed White on the spacewalk for Gemini 4, and now we're seeing two spacecraft in orbit coming to within 1 foot of each other. Now, prior to this, the Russians had launched two manned spacecraft simultaneously, but they never got very close to each other, but they were touting it as a rendezvous. Wally Schirra, who I spoke to on this particular topic, said there's rendezvous and proximity operations. And he said, rendezvous is when you wink at a pretty girl across the room. Proximity operations is when you walk over and nibble on her ear.
Well,
yeah, so
Wally,
there we have a classical test pilot's outlook on rendezvous and prox ops.
That's it.
Not politically correct, but who cares?
Yeah. Just look at that's a rare
that
shot.
That is just
there.
a gorgeous
Don't
picture.
You,
you got the spacecraft
and
in the
blue
Earth.
line.
Isn't that great?
It just looks so 3D.
Oh, I mean, you know, and as we're kids growing up in the shadow of all this, you know, you just see pictures like this, and you say to yourself, "There's nothing this country can't do."
Yeah, and just for those of you, they do not get the astronauts cannot get in that white part of the spacecraft. That's that's the service module where all the avionics and
life support and your retro rockets.
Yeah. But they just stay in the dark part there, looking out those windows, and they
sitting in those seats and not moving at all.
Yeah. We talked I know on the GT6 or 7 where they're 14 days in space. What do you do when you're bored? Jim Lovell took with him a book.
Roughing It by Mark Twain, and
Did he?
he never read it.
Okay. Borman, I probably took a book or two with him too. But
I don't know, but I think Frank Borman would be the kind of guy who would have his eyes on that instrument panel every minute that he was awake. He was that focused and that mission oriented.
So there's that beautiful photograph. Here's another one up close.
Yeah.
The
and you
front
can see
part there is the for the
section that houses the parachutes, and what you see there in the front are the rendezvous radar and radar transponder. So
once again, in 1966, we never saw a manned spacecraft orbiting Earth with our own eyes.
Right.
All right. The guys in it couldn't do a selfie, of them in orbit. So that's what was so fascinating about this was, oh my God, there's two men in there, and there's two men in the one photographing it there.
I think the one picture we did take up on orbit before this was on Gemini 4. Jim McDivitt got some good pictures of Ed White.
Right.
Exactly.
Like you say, at Gemini 4, you got pieces of the spacecraft and so forth. Ed White took a few pictures, I think, in there. But look in the window there.
Oh, yeah. Beat Army.
We had 4 astronauts. Yep. 3 were from the Army, and 1 was a Navy guy.
3 were from the Navy, and 1 was
I'm sorry. I have it
Air
backwards.
Force, West Point.
Yeah.
You had 3
Annapolis.
3 Annapolis guys and 1 West Pointer.
Yeah.
So, of course, Frank became the target for a lot of these practical jokes, and you can see him in the window there, not Tom Stafford's window. It's a sign that says Beat Army. And there was another stunt that was pulled just after they got up on orbit with Borman and Lovell. They got up on orbit, vehicle stable, everything's looking good, and they're in blackout going from one ground station to the next. And Jim says, okay, Frank, I'm supposed to give you this now. And he reaches over, pulls out a manila envelope and gives it to him, and it's marked top secret. And Frank opens it, and he pulls out the paper, and there are 2 arrows on it. And the paper says, starboard, right, port, left.
Okay. Oh, is that right?
So there was just no end of this ribbing for the lone West Pointer.
And the Army-Navy game was this weekend, and had a NASA flare. The Navy uniforms did. And when Frank Borman was asked about this, he says, "Yeah, I saw something in the window. I think it said beat."
It said beat Navy.
Beat Navy, yeah, yeah. But my eyesight's not too good. He said something like that, didn't he?
Yeah, they were up on orbit. Said, "Can you see that sign, Frank?" No. He says, "Yeah." It says beat Navy.
Yeah, yeah. To talk back and forth. To your chums that you like Marty's in a spacecraft and we're talking to him. I mean, that just had to be. Just so special.
Read these transcripts, listen to the comm between the 2 spacecraft, and you hear these guys, and they're so relaxed. It's as they're sitting in their Barker lounger at home. But remember, these 2 spacecraft at one point are within 1 foot of one another, and while their relative velocity is only, say, 1 foot, 2 feet per second, they are both traveling at 17,500 miles per hour. So what you want to do to replicate that, get in your Indianapolis race car, get your other friend in one, go down the Indy Speedway at 200 miles per hour and pull next to each other at that speed and touch the other guy's fender.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing there.
Without wrecking. Where would you see transcripts like that, Nick?
They are online. Many of the NASA sites have them, and some of the private sites have mission transcripts, and you'll be able to find it.
Because it's all out there, right? You can read every word they say of every mission.
And I'll remind you that at this time, the Soviet Union was conducting their program in deep, dark secrecy. The Russians didn't say anything except that the launch was successful and the cosmonaut had come home safely, and that's all they do. All of these missions were being conducted in the full glare of worldwide publicity on radio, on television, in the newspapers. And I think, again, that fact really captured the imagination of the world in the way the Russian flights never could.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They were participants with us, so the Europeans and other friendly countries around the world. Yeah. And by the way, in this 2 years of the Gemini program, Russia did not fly a manned flight. They were building their 3-man or 2-man Soyuz.
And of course, in '64, Khrushchev had been deposed, so priorities were realigned, and Brezhnev did not put as much emphasis on the space program as did Khrushchev.
That's right. There's our beautiful picture there. It's our background. So they didn't land them on land.
Back in the old days, and the helicopters
like we landed Artemis.
we had
the Orion.
And I watched the Artemis recovery, and of course, we had all the guys in the Zodiac boats. Back during the Gemini program, our frogmen jumped out of those helicopters and
Yeah,
secured
Zodiac
that
boats back.
flotation collar. So it was a little different back in those days. But you can also clearly see here the green dye marker that
Right.
marked out their position so they could be found quickly. And I believe this is one of the Gemini 7 crew members being winched into the recovery helicopter.
You know, just another element of complexity. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, who's going to load up the green dye in the bottle, and then where's the pyrotechnics, or however we're going to distribute that out so that if it's real cloudy or bad weather, we can find these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible the amount of detail thought through.
Well, you ask any of the astronauts of that generation, how did we get to the moon ahead of the Russians? They said 3 reasons. Training, training, and training.
Okay.
And
Training.
testing, too. So here's another spacecraft. There's Tom on your left and Wally coming out of the other seat on the right. And after a very successful mission, as I say, Gemini 6 was only up there for just over a day. So it was a very quick, very rapid mission. But boy, what a great sense of accomplishment everyone had with the success of that mission. We had just crossed a very important milestone. We had successfully performed one of the techniques that were going to be necessary for going to the moon, and that was rendezvous between 2 spacecraft. You know, incredibly important for the future success of Apollo.
Little did Tom Stafford know there that he would become the prime crew after the backup crew of Gemini 9 were killed in a plane crash, Bassett and C, and then one of the most harrowing flights of all, GT9, that's so well shown out there at the visitors complex.
Gosh, yeah.
And we were watching that, Marty and I, yesterday. They recreate the EVA of CERN that didn't go right.
And there's not
the Gemini 9's out there, but
there's not only the spacewalk from hell on Gemini 9, but also the failure of the Agena to get into orbit, and then the use of the augmented target docking adapter, the angry alligator, that did not shed its nose cone, and so they were not able to dock with it as they wanted to. Here's Frank Borman being winched up out of the water into the helicopter.
2 weeks later, bringing some fresh air.
Oh, man. Can you imagine how that ocean air must have felt? That must have been remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, these are the kind of rides that would scare the hell out of me, but these astronauts, this is just every day.
Again, this is all part of your training. You did this during survival training when you were in the Air Force or the Navy or what have you.
Trust everybody up
being
there.
winched into a helicopter was not a new experience for these guys.
Well, we've really enjoyed hearing this insight from you, Nick. Here's the crew there.
Home again.
Deke Slayton's on
Deke
the far
Slayton there
right.
on the right side, and Frank and Jim and Wally and Tom, and just a successful mission, well performed, well done. And these guys had to, aside from the smiles of getting to see one another again, these guys had to be filled with a great sense of satisfaction and that they had accomplished a major mission objective of the Gemini program. And again, this is another big footstep on the way to the moon, and you can be sure that these guys were fully cognizant of that.
And don't forget, we're in a very heated moon race with Russia. They wanted to prove through landing on the moon that their way of life was better than ours, and so they had their problems and didn't make it. We're going to end with looking at our good friend there, Mr. Tom Stafford. He's been a big help to our museum.
Yeah.
He's gotten a little long in the tooth to do talks out there. I know he used to.
Well, again, a remarkable gentleman, and
here he is out at his with
in
his
Weatherford,
Gemini 9.
Oklahoma,
Yep.
at the Stafford Museum.
A couple years
there's
ago.
the Gemini spacecraft out there. So, yeah, again, you just can't say enough about Tom Stafford and his impact, not only on the United States manned space program, but also on the programs of the Air Force and now the Space Force, and many of the things that he's made possible. You would not believe the number of astronauts he, how shall I say, sponsored. Famous story of one astronaut who had not been selected for a group and mentioned it to General Stafford, and he said, apply for the next selection. And he did, and he was chosen.
Right.
So there are a lot of people out there who, in many cases, may not know it, but owe their careers in manned spaceflight to Tom Stafford. And he had a remarkable talent for picking the right people for the right job.
And let's just throw in there that he is the first American to shake the hand of a Russian in outer space, Alexei Leonov, who they become lifelong friends. We lost Alexei a couple years ago. Can speak fluent Russian. Very involved with the Star City situation of paving the way for the Mir shuttle program. Just so many layers to this man.
He's been closely involved in the discussions back and forth between the American program and the Russian program, and really, and in many ways, a goodwill ambassador for the American manned space program.
Absolutely, we can't wait to see you again, Mr. General Stafford. We call him the general there. So we thank. We're here at the end. We thank Nick Thomas for another great Stay Curious program. You can see him out there Tuesdays through Saturdays at Delaware North Kennedy Visitors Complex out there. My boss, Karen Conklin, wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas and your wife and family. There was
Thank you very much.
Some little
Thank you.
cookies for your
Much
tooth there.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you a lot, Nick. We really do.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure coming out here.
Well, we really enjoy your stories. We like what you brought to Stay Curious, and we can't thank you enough for your support. It means the world where we're going. You see what we're doing, and like I said, having you in our corner is a big deal here, right, Marty?
It's a great cause to be associated with.
Well, we've all become good friends around here. You're part of our family, and we mean that sincerely. Marty, we got anything to clean up on our Streamlabs program today?
Nope, we're caught up with everything.
All right, I'll be reading some of your comments and making comments about them. We've got a country western star that's going to do a video, music video here. His last name's Tenpenny. I think it's Michael Tenpenny. You listen to country music?
I listen to the old country music that came out of the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
The stuff that I hear now
Willie
comes from,
Whalen and Emmy Lou
Patsy
and
Cline.
Patsy, I'm with you there. Well, this guy's pretty good. And anyway, one of the things we do here, we're going to open up our museum for a Nashville outfit to do a video here of something about a guy hankering to have a girl and take her to space, I guess. I don't know what it's about. I better shut up before I get too deep here, right, Marty? It's too late already, Marty says. So, well, thank you all for staying curious with us, kicking our week off here. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about Apollo 17 again tomorrow. I mean, there's only 6 times a year we can talk about landing on the moon. Why isn't December 11th a national holiday, Nick?
Exactly.
I mean, geez, July 20th certainly should be.
July 20th and May 5th should also be a national holiday.
There you go. May 5th is
Alan Shepard Day.
Shepard Day, his first, so we celebrate those days here on Stay Curious with you, everybody out there supporting us. So Nick is going to be back next Monday. We're going to talk about Apollo 8, some of the same characters with a different twist on them, and throw Bill Anders in there.
Right.
And so looking forward to that. Nick, as usual, maybe we'll call out. Who's the astronauts out there this week?
This week, starting tomorrow, Bill MacArthur will be with us tomorrow, yeah.
I know that you've got, who's going to be over there over Christmas? I didn't have my list in front of me.
Again, I'd have to go back and look at my list.
Winston's out there the 19th.
Okay. Gregory.
Fred Gregory will be out there this month, yeah.
So you all, Fred Gregory will be here over the Christmas holiday, Winston Scott, and Bill MacArthur. Bill MacArthur's good. He's really he's done a lot of stuff. I love him. Anyway, all of you out there, we got a great week planned. Wednesday, 90-year-old Hugh Harris is going to be here. Yep, we're going to celebrate his birthday again with him, and we're going to talk about Christmas in space with the voice of NASA. So. And then the rest of the week, we'll just be getting our jingle bells on, all right? So, Nick, and we'll see you out there at the Space Center. Thank you, sir, for all that you do.
Much. Thank you.
Marty, thank you. On behalf of our Executive Director, Karen Conklin, I'm Mark Marquette, saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.